Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who is going to be reviewing the album Javelin by Sufjan Stevens. But not really. I'm not going to give it the same level of attention that I give other albums. I'm not even going to give it the same amount of attention I gave his last album. I'm going to give it the highest compliment I can give it. That doesn't sound like a compliment at all. I'm not going to listen to this album a second time. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because it is a masterpiece of grief. As he wrote in his sort of introduction to the album, it's dedicated to the light of my life, my beloved partner and best friend Evans Richardson, who passed away in April, a gem of a person full of life, love, laughter, curiosity, integrity, and joy. One of those rare and beautiful ones you find only once in a lifetime, precious, impeccable, and absolutely exceptional in every way. I know relationships can be very difficult sometimes, but it's always worth it to put in the hard work and care for the ones you love, especially the beautiful ones who are few and far between. If you happen to find that kind of love, hold it close, hold it tight, savor it, tend to it, and give it everything you've got, especially in times of trouble. So that's why I'm only going to listen to this album once, because it's so good. You know, I love my wife. I'm one of those guys. I guess I'm a wife guy, but I don't call myself a wife guy because wife guys end up being weirdos and jerks and unfaithful. I really do love my wife, and the thought of losing her is just too much for me. It's just too much. I actually talked about this when I did the Blonde Redhead review, when I talked about this book, which I think is a great companion piece to this album by Sufjan Stevens, Joan Didion, The Year of Magical Thinking, right? So this is a book all about Joan Didion's husband who died rather mysteriously or suddenly, not mysteriously, but rather suddenly at dinner. And the entire book is this great meditation on the nature of life and death and the mundanity of death and how difficult it is to live and continue on. And I've never finished that book. I've started reading it a couple times, but I get to a certain point and it just hurts. It hurts me too much to think about people that I love and losing them. So that's why I only listened to this album once. So I am going to share my thoughts with you, but I'm not going to give it the same level of attention. And in order to sort of explain even further why, I went back here. So this area over here is my main area of scholarship, 17th century French literature. That's what I studied in my undergrad. And La Rochefoucauld wrote something called Maxims, Les Maximes, where he just has these little sentences and these little statements that are often very true and often very deep. And one that I've always loved and I think is quite true is Le soleil ni la mort ne se peuvent regarder fixement, which can be roughly translated to neither the sun nor death can be stared at with a fixed gaze. That to think about death in a sincerely deep way is like staring at the sun, like you just can't do it. And that's how I feel about this album. It's too real, it's too raw, it's too good. It is too effective at doing what it does. But still, here's my thoughts after one listen. And hey, if you have more thoughts, you know, my comment sections are awesome. Other people's comment sections are fine, but mine are awesome, okay? It's not all, you know, just goofy stuff, you know? It's quite good. So if you have more thoughts on this album, put it down in the comments. You can do whole paragraphs if you want. It's great. But this is what I was able to pick up in my one listen. Now I did listen to it. I did have the lyrics in front of me, so I did give it a very close listen. I wasn't like walking around, I wasn't at the gym. Part of the intimacy of this album comes from the way it's recorded, where it's just him by himself. The only people who are added are the sort of other voices, which end up being more like a choir than just like a chorus, if that makes sense. Like there's a real religious feeling to this album. There's a real sort of religious theme. There appears to be a kind of spiritual battle. But what I love about this is that often when there's art that is made in the wake of a close person dying, it's sort of, why God, why? Why does good things happen to bad people? Or why do good things happen to bad people? Why does smart people use bad grammars? And that's not what this album is about, at least not as I figure. It feels to me like this is just a very interesting series of songs. About half of them appear to be about what it is to mourn and to lose somebody. And then the other half is about how hard the relationship was. And that makes it even better of a piece of art, because there's this realism to it, where if you didn't know the backstory, you might think this was a breakup album. Like he was just talking about who he was breaking up with. And that gives it a real strength. That gives it so much strength that if I could have only listened to this album in that way, there's a chance I never would have even picked up on the death aspect of it. It is a story of a real relationship, an imperfect relationship. And I'm going to go back to his quote here. If you happen to find that kind of love, hold it close, hold it tight, savor it, tend to it, and give it everything you've got, especially in times of trouble. It's beautiful. It's beautifully said, and it comes through in this music. And I can't take it. I can't take it. It makes me too sad. I once dated a woman, and she would say sad like that, and it made me laugh. Like, that's sad. Like she sort of had that sort of exaggerated sad. She was very educated. Like she didn't sound silly when she said words, but just the way that she would say sad. Like it's a sad album. So let's go through the album. Let's go track by track. I guess I'll give you a stamp, an example song. Why not start with Goodbye Evergreen? I guess you can click above Picasso's The Lovers. Interestingly enough, I found that painting in the trash. Actually, on a walk with that girlfriend who used to say sad. It's a reproduction of a Picasso, and I found it in the trash. I thought it was nice. So, it starts off with this plodding piano, very mournful. A lot of the themes on here are mourning, and everything, goodbye Evergreen, I love you, but everything heaven sent must burn out in the end. The bitterness, the feeling, this feels like the first words that came to the poet's head when someone that he cares about dies. I don't know how his partner died. I didn't know he was gay. I don't know his music that well. I listened to that last album a fair amount, and I remember hearing Age of Ads when it came out. So it doesn't matter, but I didn't know. But there are like different hints at how this person died, so I can't tell from listening. In here, there's all these references to growing like a cancer, delivering me from poison pain. So I'm supposing maybe cancer. There's a sort of bitterness and sadness and depression that's hinted at, and even a suicidal act that's hinted at, where maybe it's suicide. I don't know. I can tell you one thing. It doesn't matter. It matters to him. It matters to his family. It matters to people who it matters to. But us, we should not be looky-loo rubberneckers, right? Are you a looky-loo rubbernecker? Don't be a looky-loo rubbernecker. Somebody died. That's all we need to know, and this is the album of processing it. And the term, Goodbye Evergreen, because the whole thing is that whether or not you think about it, we're in the fall, right? So look, you can look out my window, right? I don't know if the light will go, but that's the window for my office. I'm not going to have this nice office for very long, so I'm going to appreciate it while I'm here. And you can see the trees starting to turn. And there's the whole passage of life. And there's the whole cycle of life is played out in nature, and it's played out in trees, right? And when we get to the fall, the trees start to die, and then they go through death, and then there's rebirth of the spring. But the evergreen is in defiance of that. That's why Christians use it as the symbol of Jesus for their Christmas trees. That and some weird hook'em from witchcraft as well. But that's the basic idea. That's why they use the evergreen. So the evergreen is the symbol of something that never dies, of something that doesn't turn over, of something so permanent. So saying goodbye to evergreen is a naturalistic way of indicating a shocking loss of something that you don't think can go. I love you is just repeated over and over again. Another thing I will say about this album, it's raw, but you don't feel tears in Sufjan's voice. You don't feel like they're recording and he's just about to break out and cry. Even though it's so raw, it's poetically raw. It's not raw in the performance. It's actually fairly restrained in the performance. I almost feel the most emotion in the way the guitar is played. There's this restrained, sad, muted quality to the guitar that I can read emotion into, but he's not saying, I love you. Yeah, it's like using some studio trickery here. In general, the album follows a pretty similar pattern. Basically, every song is an instrument starts, usually a guitar, sometimes a piano. Voices come in. Over the first verse, maybe one other element is added by the post-chorus. A whole other element is added. Then the second and third verses have a lot more built up underneath the piano or the guitar. And then there's just a little playtime, just a little instrumental deal at the end which is sort of both unnecessary and absolutely essential, because without it, the album would feel a little too light, a little too, I mean, even though the subject is very heavy in terms of songwriting and what you're listening to, it might feel a little too much just like sort of ditties in the air, like dandelions or whatever. I'm being poetic today. But with those added production elements, it also gives you time to think about what you're hearing. And maybe that's part of the problem. You know, maybe that's part of why it's so hard to listen to, is I don't I don't want to think about what he is asking me to think about. It's like staring into the sun, which only one man has been able to do successfully. And he might be president again. The next track is called A Running Start, which has that kind of guitar line I'm talking about, a very sweet guitar line. If a guitar line can sound personal, this sounds it. This is a whole song about like the exhilarating power of first kisses and finding serenity and sublime beauty of nature. That's his quote that I found on Genius about the song. And it's nice because the album does sort of have a kind of progression of a relationship here, and this feels like that. This feels like that blush of new love, and I know the time has come to ask you for a kiss. There's almost like a Baroque post-pop chorus. There's lots of oohs in this album. And again, if you told me there's going to be an album that's going to be about someone's lover who died, and I don't mean lover, I mean like life partner, right? And they died, and there's a lot of oohs, I would expect those oohs to be a lot more pained. I don't know what the secret is to these oohs, but they're not wails. They're not lamentations. Like you know when you watch TV and they have the little closed captioning so that people who can't hear can follow along and they'll describe how things are. These oohs are not lamenting oohs. A nice little developed outro again. Some horns come in, or at least some horn sounds. The next song is Will Anybody Ever Love Me? Now, why'd you have to ask that question, Sufjan? Makes me sad. That's a sad thing to say. Again, with these plucked guitar lines, very tight, sad minor chords, builds up beautifully. He's like whisper singing basically the entire time, but he whisper sings with a lot of range. If you can do those things at the same time, that's what he manages to do. Very powerful, almost poppy chorus. Will anybody ever love me for good reasons, without grievance, not for sport? Will anybody ever love me in every season? Pledge allegiance to my heart, pledge allegiance to my burning heart. Maybe you've never wondered if anyone will love you. That's possible. In which case, congratulations for marrying your high school sweetheart and having it work out. But most of us have had this question, and the way he's asking this question feels like a completely authentic way. And what makes this song so powerful to me is I don't know if he is singing this from past Sufjan or from present Sufjan. If it's past Sufjan, then the answer, yes, someone will love me, and the person who will love him is Evans, right? This person who just passed, right? But if he's singing it from present, then maybe he's wondering if anyone can ever love him again, or if he's going to have to die alone. So either way, it's a very meaningful song. And just that sense, you know, not for sport, pledge allegiance to my heart, just beautiful lyrics. And there's like a banjo sound. Is he playing banjo in here as well? The banjo itself has a very strange restrained quality, you know, because it doesn't have an F hole, so it doesn't project a lot of noise. A lot of the noise comes from like the sort of percussive sound of the top of a banjo. And so like when he plays guitar even on this album, it feels almost like it's that kind of banjo restrained sounds. Another huge expansive outro, some automated rhythms, and just these intertwining voices of my burning heart. Next track is Everything That Rises, and this is the first song that fooled me. I thought Everything That Rises must fall. I thought this was tied into the whole idea of like, you know, heaven has to take away all the beautiful things, but that's not what it is at all. Thanks to Jake Owens on Lyric Genius. Sometimes there's people who do a great job, and he points out that you know, once we get through the, again, more like multiple guitars on this, kind of very restrained, we get to this beautiful chorus, that it's all tied into a French Jesuit priest, Thierry de Chardin, who says, remain true to yourself, but move ever upward towards greater consciousness and self-love. At the summit, you will find yourselves united with all those who, from every direction, have made the same ascent. For everything that rises must converge. So this is almost like a pyramid scheme. Not a pyramid scheme, but you imagine a pyramid that like, everything that rises, everything that transcends, must eventually come together. So I'm 46 years old. Statistically, you're probably about half my age if you're watching this, maybe a little bit under. I never thought about this. I've never thought about transcending ideas and transcendent people converging. I picture people going up into heaven and sort of these kinds of ideas as being infinite spaces where you don't need togetherness. But this image of coming together, it's gorgeous. And it's religious. And it makes sense because the second verse is basically gospel, like some call and response over here. Jesus, lift me up to a higher plane. Oh, I don't remember how the song goes. I've only heard it once. But that's the kind of way that it feels. Nice little outro bit with twirling sounds, nice guitar outro, then genuflecting ghost. This must be played with a capo, very, very high guitar notes, kind of intertwining guitars here again. The voice sounds unsure, and the whole time that he's singing the album, he sings in this very sort of fractured way, but this is more fractured. It actually seems like he is singing in an insecure manner. And what's wild is I had that thought, and then the chorus comes in, and his chorus is joined by a choir. Like it sounds like a church choir to me. Maybe it's not, but that's how it sounds to me. And he talks about insecurity. Rest assured, words come easy, insecure, love and please me, scared word, bind me in salt, as I praise your name. Really the sense of this insecurity that is all the way throughout this album. There's a lot of insecurity here. And he seems to rely more on these other vocalists. Basically every song has other vocalists on it. And this song appears to be relying on them more. And I think that's on purpose, to show his frailty. I thought I fixed the light on my camera, but I look super washed out again, don't I? I look like all hazy. I look like Sybil Shepherd in Moonlighting. If you really are half my age, you don't know what the hell I just said, but that's okay. Anyways, next song's called My Little Red Fox. You big dummy! Anyways, Red Fox was a very influential and important African-American comedian who starred in the TV show Sanford & Son. He was famous for saying, "You big dummy." So the song is called My Red Little Fox, not My Little Red Fox. But I was imagining a little tiny, like miniature red fox walking around. But this is great because now we're in a very different area. So it was like guitar, 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 but now we have just piano and voice. And what's cool here is that the voice is just following the piano, and there's no chorus here. There's just like this piano that's playing and this voice that's following. And at a certain point, there's like a folksy recorder that comes there. And I drink till it's lost, drinking words within that spin down Pentecost, kiss me with fire of gods, just say what you want. I think I said this in my last Sufjan review, but he's religious, but in a mystic sense. You know, mystics are people who are Christian, you know, they don't have to be Christian, but Christian mystics are Christian, and they have sort of a one-on-one relationship with God, and their vision of what Christianity is often very personal and driven by themselves, not driven by some sort of external body. And definitely the way that he sings feels like a mystic, like he has some sort of vision, one which he might not be even able to enunciate, one that I cannot certainly translate for you, but it makes sense to me when I hear it, drinking words within that spin down Pentecost. It makes sense that I don't get it, but it feels like it makes some kind of theological sense. It's kind of weird booping sounds with the choir. The weirdest production choice on this album is that booping sound. You're probably a fan of this album. You've probably listened to it more than I have. It doesn't mean you don't love your partner, by the way. I'm just a sensitive guy. I'm really sensitive. So You Are Tired is the next song. This is where we start to get to the point where we have the dark side of this relationship. The beginning reminds me strongly of Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo. If I ever met Sufjan Stevens, first thing I would ask him, hey, were you inspired by Driver's License? Because everyone knows that song rules. Very sweet, some strings on here, and just this song is, oh my God, because it feels like it's the regret, you know, like it's like the regret of not being there for this person, or this feeling of this relationship ending, and you know, like there was actually a time where I thought I was really sick. It was before I started the channel. It turns out I had like a variation of of that thing that you get when you kiss too much. But the doctors couldn't figure out what it was. I was like going to like oncologists and everything. I thought it might be blood cancer. I had all this stuff. And I was in a relationship at the time, and I didn't want to be. Like, I didn't want to go through that, but also, like, you know, it was a fine relationship, but it wasn't the kind of relationship that you go through blood cancer with. So it was this very kind of weird feeling of like guilt and fear and like wanting somebody and caring for them. So again, I don't know. I don't know the history that's on here, but there's this real sort of sad sense here. So you are tired as the sun, mononucleosis. It was a version of that, Epstein-Barr, that's what it was called. So you are tired as the sun. Are you with or without a friend? I mean, just the idea of being the sun being tired, just this relationship being over, tired of my kiss. I was still the man in love with you when I knew it was already done. So we had this weird situation where someone is mourning somebody who probably was going to break up with him. Maybe. Next song is called Javelin. Okay, now here I wrote the whole song in my head, and then I heard the song and it was totally different. Sorry, I got my other microphone here. I don't even know if it's working, by the way. It's possible I'm talking and there's no voice. You can't hear anything. I'll have to find out when I'm done. So when it was called Javelin, to have and to hold, I was picturing, knowing before going into the album that it was about the death of his partner, that it was this image of a relation of letting someone go into death as like throwing a javelin. And then, like to have and to hold the javelin, you have it in your hand, but you eventually have to let it go. And just the image of like death being this stick flying through the air, but that's not at all what it's about. It's got this guitar comes back, great high whispering voice. Searching through the snow for the javelin, I had not meant to throw it right at you, for if it hit its mark, then there'd be blood in the place where you stood. A terrible thought to have and to hold. So to have and to hold, that's from wedding vows. You know, do you promise to have and to hold for as long as you may live? So help you God, till death do you part, right? That's the whole thing. Death do you part is tied into have and to hold. So that's what I thought this was about. But he's tricking us, and he's actually saying to have and to hold these terrible thoughts, and the javelin represents like an actual threat. There's some reference about him throwing himself on the rocks, so maybe it's a suicide thing. Next song. Is he a funny guy? I don't get a lot of humor off of him, but maybe he's one of those guys who sings very seriously, but goofs around a lot. Because the next song is called Shittalk, and you know you don't expect on an album of this topic and in this gravitas to have a song called Shittalk, but here we are. Great. Like it's funny because I was listening to the guitar. I'm like, you know, the guitar here is like markedly better than other guitar. Like it's a little bit more emphatic, it's a little bit more interesting. Turns out it's Bryce Dessner from The National, so there you go. Hey, no one watched my last National video. What's up with that? No more fighting, no more talking shit, do as I say, not as I give up, not as I failed to live. So this is like reconciliation, right? This is the idea that he's trying to stay with the person that he found, this beautiful person that he found, even through the hard times. And it's beautiful. It's these lyrics are both simple and complicated at the same time. You know, he's just saying, you know, I don't want to fight at all over and over and over again, like these 80s-esque percussion in the background. But like it's with the context of this death and this loss and this mourning, it's beautiful. Like I don't know at what stage of the relationship he's writing from. I don't know if he's asking for forgiveness from a dead person, if he is thinking about the way that he acted before the person he cared about died, if he is thinking about what he wished he could say, if this is his message to the world, that this is what you should say. I don't know. But it's haunting strings. Goes on like much longer than you'd expect, the ending of this song. And again, I don't know, but I think the songs are long and have these instrumental bits just to give you more time to think. The next song is called There's a World. And what's funny is, you know, I kind of recognized the title, but I didn't think much of it. And I listened to it. I was like, oh, this is the Neil Young, There's a World. So Neil Young has a song off of Harvest called There's a World. It's one of two songs off of Harvest, which are just overproduced. And hey, you can get mad at me. I'm a big Neil Young fan. Harvest has my favorite, probably my favorite, top 5 favorite Neil Young song, Out on the Weekend. See the lonely boy out on the weekend, trying to make it pay, can't relate to joy, tries to speak. Beautiful, beautiful album. But A Man Needs a Maid, and then this song, There's a World, they're just, the production is just like there's harps and full orchestras, and there's just too much. So if you're interested in the song, what I suggest, don't listen to that version. Listen to the version live at Massey Hall 1971, because there you get the bare bones of the song. And it's an interesting way to end it. I mean, Neil Young himself is a figure of love. He loved and was very wonderful to his wife of many decades, up until they got divorced, and then she died. So I don't know, like Neil Young is a figure of love in pop music. Maybe that's why. Maybe just the lyrics happen to speak to him. It's a great cover because it doesn't sound a lot like the original. It has different instrumentation. It has basically different melodies. But it fits in within this whole kind of theme about leaving and being alone and worrying and trying to find some kind of connection. So there's my review. If you liked it, you can put in the comments, AVAA, awesome video as always. I will always heart it. Unless you try and throw some like weird political stuff in there, in which case I'm not comfortable like hearting political stuff, because I do get political on this channel, but I don't really want a political dialogue. I want a musical dialogue. I want artistic dialogue. So yeah. So you can do that. Smash like bucket, subscribe. I don't have my list of Patreons, but thank you to my Patreons. They help me buy music. I'm not going to buy this album. I'm never going to listen to it again. As a matter of fact, I was going back to my campus library. I brought back like 15 books. I had a whole bunch of books on Dante, a bunch of books on graffiti and hip hop. And I saved this book just for this prop, for this video. So I'm going to go return this to the library now. Maybe get a bite to eat. Okay. Until next time, don't stare at the sun. There's the camera.